Good morning and welcome to the quarterfinals of the Public Sector Debate Competition. We're glad you could join us today, including those on our social media platforms. For those who are wondering who this new face is, I am Paula Shea Hastings. I'm a communications specialist here at the TIU. Now, we had intended to be more advanced in the competition at this point, but we had to reschedule due to the passage of Hurricane Beryl. And we know some persons are still putting their lives back together, and we're indeed grateful to both teams for joining us today. But of course, we have to continue to spare a thought for those who are still recovering from Hurricane Beryl. Now today, for the quarterfinals, we have the top 8 teams in the competition, competing, of course, to advance to the semifinals. Last round, we said farewell to some really good teams, but those of you especially, we have both teams returning from last year. That is the nature of the competition. For those joining us online, if you have missed any of our previous matches, you can find them, of course, on our social media platforms. And before we get started, we want to say a special thanks to our suppliers and the respective teams that have enabled us to get the competition back on track. Now, down to the business of today. In this match, we have the Administrator General's Department and the Jamaica Information Service debating the moot. Be it resolved that privacy and data protection concerns relating to NIDS are exaggerated. I know we're all excited to get the match started. So first I will invite Team Proposition to introduce themselves.
Hello.
Good morning, everyone. Is it?
Hello? Okay. Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Lewis. I am the first speaker for Team Admin Gen.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kali Lyle, and I am the second speaker for Admin Gen.
And my name is Kudian King, and I am Admin Gen reply speaker.
Thank you, Team Proposition. I will now ask Team Opposition to introduce themselves.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Peter Gay Hodges, and I'm the first speaker.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Charnel Henry, second speaker for the GIS debate team.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Twyla Whelan, and I am the reply speaker.
Thank you, teams. And the adjudicators for today's match are, of course, our partners from the Jamaican Association for Debating and Empowerment Limited. That's JADE Limited. Judges, please introduce yourselves.
Good morning. Thank you very much, Paula Shea. My name is Jermaine Barrett, and I'm the chair adjudicator for this match.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Alan Carter, and I'm one of the wing adjudicator for this match.
All right, good morning, everyone. I am Najani Stewart, and I will be your second wing adjudicator for this match.
Thank you, judges. The teams are familiar with the rules, so let the debate begin. Over to you, judges, and good luck, teams.
Thank you once again, Paula Shea, and of course, I endorse that sentiment. Good luck, teams. Before we get started, though, just a reminder of the rules. Well, the essential ones at least, the speaker times. Be reminded that your first minute will be indicated by that ding of a bell, and when you've gotten to your last minute, you'll hear another ding of that bell. Similarly, when you've spoken for 2 minutes, or when you're out of time, rather, you'll hear 2 dings of the bell. And, we're kind enough to give you 10 seconds extra. So with the complete elapsing of your allotted time plus 10 seconds, you'll hear continuous dinging of the bell. All right? Now, how much time do you have to speak? If you're the first speaker, you speak for 7 minutes. If you're the second speaker, 6 minutes. We enter then into a period of exciting cross-questioning, following which we take a 1-minute pause, then we resume with the reply speeches. All right? Reply speeches begin with that from the opposition team, followed by that from the proposition team. Teams, are there any questions? I know you're seasoned by now, so I understand you have no questions. At this time, we're delighted to invite the first speaker from the proposition team, Jessica Lewis, to open the debate. Hear, hear.
Ready? Roadblock! We don't want a new ID system. We cannot be forced to use our bodies for ID. Hold on, wait. Put down the pitchforks and let's get the facts. Panel of adjudicators, side opposition, team proposition, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. The moot before us today states, privacy and data protection concerns relating to NIDS are exaggerated. To set the foundation, allow me to define the key terms. Privacy is an individual's right to control their personal information and identity, as per Justice Sykes in the case of Julian Robinson and the Attorney General. Data protection, per the Information Commissioner of Jamaica, refers to practices and measures taken to safeguard the privacy, integrity, and security of personal data. NIDS, or the National Identification System, is Jamaica's way of securely collecting, storing, and using basic personal and biometric information to create reliable identities for citizens. Finally, the Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines exaggerated as excessively or inappropriately heightened, inflated, or overstated. So put together, the proposition stands here to affirm that worries related to personal autonomy, integrity, and security of personal data with the Jamaican identification system is overstated. To expound on this, I will discuss the goal of NIDS in light of the concerns and ease the main privacy worries. My second speaker will show how the existing legislative framework addresses data protection and how this applies to ensure proper safeguards. Together with our reply speaker, we will show you that the concerns held are in fact exaggerated when taken as a whole. Now, understanding the role and the purpose of NIDS not only addresses the privacy concerns, but protects same. At the beginning of my presentation, I quoted an actual circulated message crying out against NIDS when it was first introduced. Understandably, the initial concerns of NIDS were not exaggerated. Under the old 2017 bill, it compelled all Jamaicans to provide data such as them vein print, your foot vein pattern, your foot, your palm, and your toe print, and your blood type. You were to submit race and your race, religion, and more to the National Identification and Registration Authority. If not, you could face criminal prosecution. Personal information could be accessed without consent, and the security measures were insufficient. Ultimately, NIDS was sent back to the drawing board, and the 2020 amendment is now the reality we face today. However, to be fair, Mr. Adjudicator, the previous situation did not reflect the purpose of NIDS that it was trying to address. In 2021's Observer article, it was revealed that the Passport Immigration Citizenship Agency had 2,449 passport fraud cases between 2009 and 2019. The RGD had 1,172 detected between 2010 and 2018. This is because Jamaica does not have a central national database with the accompanying systems to support secure, reliable identity verification and authentication. This is what is to be achieved with NIDS. Again, let's get the facts and see the protection it affords not only to the individual, but to the country. Your right to privacy, our rights, have not been infringed, but rather protected. NIDS reduces identity theft cases. It is now one person, one identity. Now, NIDS is not as novel as it may seem, and it aims to make the lives of Jamaican people more efficient through centralization. Ladies and gentlemen, the government of Jamaica already has biographic and biometric information through birth certificates, your passports, and your voter's ID. Though the voter's ID collects photographs and signatures, which is low level, and fingerprints, high level, it does not capture the entire population, and persons below 18 are excluded. No one flinched at the thought of the Electoral Commission having this data. NIDS will collect the same biometric data, but will be more inclusive as it is available for persons under 18. Further, instead of multiple methods of identification storing different information, we will now have one. NIDS 2020 requires only minimum information to be collected and displayed on the card to protect your privacy. It includes biographic data, including your date of birth and address, and your biometrics. This guarantees the uniqueness of identity registration and allows persons to authenticate based on who they are and not what they have, like a fraudulent document. While the acronym NIDS sounds new and imposing, it simply aims to secure and systemize or identifying data that is already available to the government. The concerns are therefore exaggerated. Finally, the system's very strategies further alleviate concerns and proves an existing exaggeration. Lack of knowledge of these new measures grounds the concerns, so let's dive in. NIDS will collect and store our data securely. The information will be encrypted. Only NERA accredited third parties will have access to information and only as is necessary. If a query is made, "Is this John Brown?" the response is a simple yes or no. Disclosure is limited. If an unauthorized individual manages to gain access to the biometric data, no biographic data is obtainable as they're stored separately. This is security by its very design. Furthermore, biometric data will not be accessible online. Under NIDS, we will also have to give consent to others gaining access to our data. Penalties have also been heightened under legislative framework should there be any breaches in privacy and/or data protection. Again, this provides a layer of protection as a deterrent. Notably, NIDS will not require mandatory enrollment for those who choose not to participate, nor will they be punished for same. While the system is not infallible and concerns may still exist, as with any system, let us be sure not to make a mountain out of a molehill when they have been addressed. So having heard the facts, ladies and gentlemen, the intention and strategies, we can only agree that the privacy and data protection concerns relating to NIDS are exaggerated. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that speech, first proposition speaker. All right, we now call upon the first opposition speaker, Madam Peter Gay Hodges from the Jamaica Information Service, to open opposition's case. Hear, hear.
Mr. Chairman, I rise to open the opposition stance on the moot. Be it resolved that privacy and data protection concerns relating to NIDS in Jamaica are exaggerated. In a word, we reject that notion. I would like to point out to Madam First Speaker, that accentualized identification system combats fraud. It does not equate to data safety. In fact, it makes it a target for breaches. And let me just point out, the 2020 amendment is not a panacea. And what is displayed on the card pales in comparison to the 16 pieces of information that is required for the system, not the card. Ladies and gentlemen, I put it to you that the system can only fly if it can be proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the personal information that we seek to protect can be done with no possibility of a breach. I further submit that once there is reasonable doubt, that casts a shadow over the entire operation. The fact that there is a probability, even if it is a remote one, with several layers of protection with resiliency systems, that there can be a breach is worrisome.
Point of information.
Not at this time. This, friends, is a matter of intent versus outcome, and whether the one outweighs the other. Global watchdog Access Now, which defends the digital rights of people and communities at risk, points out that while the government has a clear need to address the issue of the need for a national ID, the NIDS program is not necessarily the right solution, and that the program is going ahead in spite of the very real privacy and security concerns identified. I will outline the importance of perception and the people's concerns. My second speaker will highlight that under the proposed structure, the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. And lest we forget, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Colleagues, the measurement of exaggeration is found in the perspective of the affected.
Point of information.
Go ahead.
My opponent is reasonable doubt the threshold for exaggeration.
Hold on, I'm sorry. If reasonable doubt is a threshold for exaggeration, well, no, when I mention reasonable doubt, I'm talking about a reasonable doubt as to whether or not the system can be breached and create real problems for people. That's what I'm referring to. I will outline the importance of perception and the people's concerns. My second speaker will highlight that under the proposed structure, the spirit is willing, but the body is weak, and lest we forget, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. The measurement of exaggeration is found in the perspective of the affected and whether or not the concerns that people have are represented as worse or much larger than they really are. Exaggeration is not based on the policymakers and decision makers' outlook or viewpoint, but rather that of the public, those who will be directly affected by the system. There's just not enough confidence in the system for users to be assured that the system is foolproof and tamper-proof with the myriad of cyber incidents that are still happening in government entities. Ladies and gentlemen, if the government tells you that all passports are going to be held in one central vault rather than at your house, and that this vault has maximum security, so you should feel safe, although you know that similar vaults have been breached, and you know that the temptation is real for someone who can fraudulently use passports for gain, and you know that the keepers of the vault, though highly trained, can be bought at the right price, you don't have to put the passport in there. But if you don't, you can't travel on it. Your move. What do you do?
Point of information.
Not at this time. That choice, my friends, is called the illusion of consent. You are told that it is optional, but if you really want to do what you need to do, then you must put your passport in the vault. This is the solution. This is one of the solutions that the government came up with to say, okay, fine, since making it mandatory breaches people's rights, then let's make it optional. But how can it be optional if you need it to do so many things that you need to do in government? Civil society has been very loud about it. Jamaicans for Justice, Jamaica Youth Advocacy Network, Jamaica Accountability Meter Portal, to name a few, have all spoken. Again, Access Now points out clear flaws in the system. The final text violates key data protection principles such as data minimization and retention limitation principles, which forces an organization to only process the data needed for a specific purpose and store only as long as needed. Further, besides collecting all of these different types of personal information, granting a third-party access through APIs to verify identity, NERA states that any other law can prescribe the disclosure of identity information. There's also insufficient safeguards to ensure the security of the data that is collected, making the system more vulnerable to attack. Alarming, we say, in light of the COVID breach, which my second speaker will expound on. Cybersecurity experts have spoken. Mark Asturias from Fortinet, one of the largest cybersecurity providers worldwide, says hacking is growing in the region, and companies and governments are among the top targets. He pointed out that in 2 years, his personal information was hacked from the US government 4 times. He highlighted that if criminals gain access to persons' information from the NIDS database, they can build the profiles of their victims, buy cars and homes, and open credit cards in their names. Ladies and gentlemen, people are concerned about the centralization of data and cybersecurity vulnerabilities. People are also, not only do workers have to be trained, but they also have to be trustworthy. We're talking about tax records, property information. All it takes is one bad apple to spoil the bunch. One corrupt cop to breach the NYPD, and one corrupt data processor to leak NIDS information. Folks, in the US, in 2023, federal agencies reported over 32,000 information security incidents. So people are concerned about data misuse. People are concerned about lack of transparency. People are concerned about the adequacy of the legal and regulatory framework. It's worth noting that the recently passed Data Protection Act has not been tested in the courts to determine the efficacy, and may never get to that stage until the system is live. Ladies and gentlemen, the many concerns are not exaggerated. On the contrary, the entire country needs to understand the implications and be in a position to make informed decisions about NIDS. I thank you.
Thank you very much. First, opposition speaker. We go back to Team Administrative General's Department to hear from their second speaker. Let's make that speaker welcome. Hear, hear.
Panel of adjudicators, or worthy opponents, and audience, good morning. My first speaker would have already contextualized the moot, and it is now my job to outline how the concerns must be allayed based on the legislative framework. I will go into my substantives. To start, I will address the concern that NIDS allows for the disclosure of data without consent. The 2017 National Identification and Registration Act, NIRA, did not do enough to protect one's personal data, and it allowed for your data to be shared to others without your consent. But currently, these concerns are exaggerated. The challenge arose because we did not have a data protection bill to address the issues concerning the proper collection, processing, storage, security, and destruction of information collected. Luckily, we now have the Data Protection Act, which aids in dispelling the opposition's exaggerated privacy and data protection concerns. The Act applies to all organizations, and it tells them exactly what they can and can't do with your personal information. It sets out provisions regarding penalties for breaches and misuse of information. And
Point of information.
Not accepted at this time. And it creates an independent oversight body in the form of the Information Commissioner. The Information Commissioner is responsible for monitoring compliance with the Act and disseminating information to the public. Now, I must note that consent is embedded in both legislation.
Point of information.
Not accepted at this time. It does not restrict persons from accessing goods and services. Persons will simply see it as beneficial, but the opposition is saying that it forces persons in the long run. That's not the case. Further, NIRA has established the National Databases Inspectorate, which is the authority responsible for the monitoring and conducting routine inspections for NIDS. It acts as a guard against the misuse of personal data. Consider Pam, who wants to open a bank account. In order to access her private information, the bank must request it from the National Databases Inspectorate. Pam's information is only disclosed if she has consented to the disclosure, or if there is an order given by the court and it becomes mandatory to disclose. This helps to keep PAM's information private and secure. Now, my worthy opponents, considering everything so far, wouldn't you agree that privacy and data protection concerns relating to NIDS are exaggerated? But let us move on to the concern, not accepted at this time. Let us move on to the concern about insufficient safeguards to protect information. Many believe that the government cannot keep their information safe. That is what the opposition has said. But this is an exaggerated concern. The first speaker of the opposition said that there are insufficient safeguards, but NIDS is accompanied by its security system, the National Public Key Infrastructure, which is built with strong safeguards in place that are constantly improved to secure digital authentication. The National Public Key Infrastructure is the core security backbone for digital identification and differentiates the current national IDs from NIDS. So unlike the systems at the Electoral Office, this infrastructure is more secure. It offers a more protected firewall and enables end-to-end encryption of public information. Thus, it is not easily breached. The system detects any changes that take place accidentally or intentionally while data is stored or transmitted over the internet. If incorrectly implemented, NIDS would definitely have serious concerns, as in the case of Kenya, which has a similar NIDS system. Their rollout was very different from Jamaica, however, because Kenya would have neglected to adopt a comprehensive regulatory framework governing the collection of data. But this is the opposite. In Jamaica, we have safeguards such as the National Public Key Infrastructure, the acts which I have mentioned before, and the authorities which aid in the prevention of leaks and transfer of information without consent. There are also the data protection officers which act as watchguards for organizations to ensure that your data is protected. Each of these play a crucial role through their statutory mandate that have been carefully crafted to maintain privacy and data protection standards. Go ahead.
Are you aware that NIRA does not specify whether the system architecture and databases will be decentralized for greater security?
So the Data Protection Act, which is a part of the backbone, establishes that each organization must have systems in place that will protect your data. So even though NIDS does not specifically state it, the NIRA Act provides that it is pursuant to the Data Protection Act. I'm moving on. So the mechanisms provide not only audit trails, but also ensure privacy and confidentiality being maintained. Now, my third and final point that I will address is the amount of information that would be required to be collected. So the DPA states that the data that is collected must be adequate, relevant, and limited to what is necessary for the purposes it is processed. The standard is clearly implemented in NIRA, and it has reduced the amount of information that will be required to be collected. My first speaker would have spoken on that. As it concerns centralization, you would agree that currently we have that system in place. So, in terms of the information being scattered all over the different organizations, it would be centered to simply one database, the national databases. So, Mr. Speaker, the concern about the amount of data required is exaggerated since the information collected is adequate and necessary. And in conclusion, we have pushed for a safer, modern infrastructure that will provide a privacy-centered, data protection-compliant Jamaica. The proposition pauses.
All right, thank you very much. That's the second speaker from the proposition team. We now call upon Ms. Henry from Team JIS to advance the case on behalf of side opposition. Hear, hear.
Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed judges and fellow debaters, good morning. Before I begin my speech, let me first address some points made by the proposition. They say that there is a national database inspectorate to ensure that NIDS and NERA is secure and oversee their activities. Yet this national database inspectorate is the same entity that has suffered for years from the presence of fake voters' IDs and dead electors voting during general elections. They've mentioned that there is a Jamaica data exchange platform, but I cannot, in good conscience, allow you to believe that this platform exists. The completion date set for this is September 2024. We are not yet there, and something that does not exist cannot provide security. I stand in furtherance of the position that privacy and data protection concerns related to NIDS are not exaggerated. As my first speaker highlighted, these concerns are not only varied, but they are also steeped in the probability, or a strong probability. I will focus on 2 points. These are the inadequacy of the local data protection efforts due to the lack of operational framework, and also share with you some local and international examples of data breaches that underscore the ever-present risks related to the collection and storage of personal information. You see, in a perfect utopian world, NIDS would be perfect. We are not saying NIDS is bad. We are saying there are concerns related to it which need to be addressed. Let us examine the current state of local data protection efforts. You see, a good data protection regime has 3 components: a legal, technical, and operational framework. Where it concerns NIDS, yes, Jamaica made strides by enacting the Data Protection Act in 2020, not at this time, which is the legal framework, yet the technical framework needs work. Besides the technical framework, there is no operational framework, which would include the policies and the procedures. These are glaringly incomplete. Without it, the data protection regime is ineffective, like an overpass without a connecting support for the start or end of the bridge. It will topple. Let us look at India, for example. India had its controversial and heavily critiqued data protection bill withdrawn, not at this time. Then they rebranded it and hastily passed it last year without addressing the operational readiness of it. Does it sound familiar to anybody? This led to one singular hacker being able to breach the Aadhaar, which is India's national ID system, and then accessing and selling on the dark web the personal data of 815 million Indians. This included their names and their addresses. Similarly, Jamaica lacks the necessary operational framework to support NIDS, not at this time, please stop badgering me, making it vulnerable. For instance, the Office of Information Commissioner, which is tasked with overseeing the data protection in Jamaica, is still in its embryonic stages, and it lacks the necessary resources and expertise to fully execute its mandate. This is evident in the amount of times they've given extensions for persons to register as data controllers and data controllers under the Act and processors under the Act. Anywho, NIDS is not yet operational. Let us bear that in mind. And so you cannot see how it would work. You and I cannot see how it will work. And as such, our privacy and data protection concerns are not satisfied. This is where beta testing phase is needed to build public trust in the system and address our concerns. Secondly, let us consider examples of data breaches that highlight the risk of large-scale data systems. First American Financial Corporation suffered a data leak in 2019 and exposed 885 million file records, including social security numbers and driver's licenses.
Point of information.
Not at this time. In 2021, Facebook, which you're all familiar with, suffered a massive data breach in which the names, phone numbers, and passwords of over 530 million people were made public. These are just 2 of the biggest data privacy violations in recent years. But what do they have in common? They both use ISO 27001 standard for information security management system, yet they experience breaches. So now certainly, it would be hard for any Jamaican to believe that us brandishing our certification in this same standard would make our national database any more secure. Research conducted by Bromium in 2018 suggested that the average corporation spends $16.8 million annually on security. Both entities I mentioned previously have revenues in the billions, and as such can afford to spend that. Jamaica, on the flip side, received $68 million for the implementation of NIDS. Now, if this was dedicated to data security, which it is not, we would only be able to secure our database for 4 years. But let us not forget that regardless of the amount of money spent creating the greatest fortress of all time for data, from unauthorized access, all it would take, all of it would be futile against one singular instance of human error from an individual who is authorized to access the data from the inside. That is similar to JamCovid. In 2021, the JamCovid app experienced multiple breaches exposing the travel data and quarantine orders and quarantine locations for over 500,000 Jamaicans and visitors. Though JamCovid was touted as being cutting-edge technology in its time, the breach from the JamCovid app was caused by negligence and human error introduced by an individual working on the app. As a God-fearing country with many Christian beliefs, I leave you with the words of 1 Corinthians 10:23. All things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful, but not all things are edifying. This is the word of the Lord.
Amen, sister. Amen. I feel it's time for the benediction. No, but we have to collect the offering first. Anyway, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's now time for the exciting cross-questioning section. And so we begin with 5 minutes on the clock. Yes? No, not just yet. That's after. That's after. Indeed. So we're going to move straight away into our cross-questioning section. 5 minutes on the clock. Team opposition, JIS, you get the first go at asking questions of team is it administrative or administrator? Oh, Administrator General Department. You know the rules. 20 seconds for a question, 45 seconds for a response. All right? You may begin, JIS, with your first question.
Okay. Has there been an independent audit or review of the security protocols and data protection practices? And if so, what were the findings?
So my opponent, as we would have made mention, NIDS is a 7-year plan. NIDS has been in plan for around 7 years, and there have been talks of an independent audit set. As you know, we are rolling out phase by phase, just as you had suggested. So there will be an independent audit, and whatever information that comes from that audit will be integrated into NIDS to better the system.
Would it be unfair to then say until that is complete or the concerns of the public related to privacy and data concerns are not exaggerated?
Yes, it would be unfair to say that because, as I mentioned, we have revamped, remodeled, and designed NIDS many times. We have targeted the concerns of privacy and data protection. We've put an act in place. We've put oversight of the act. We've put checks and balances in place. We've put strong firewalls. We have looked at other countries where this has worked, like Kenya and Singapore. We have inherited things from them. And of course, this is a system that we're building. So unfair, yes. NIDS, yes.
Also, just to add that we have implemented a pilot program that was saturated. So originally the amount was supposed to be 350 persons.
So happy that you mentioned the pilot program. The pilot program was actually more of a sensitization session and not an actual rollout of anything for NIDS. But question, I'm so happy you also mentioned that there is legislation to support NIDS, and this is one of them is the Data Protection Act. Please tell me how the Data Protection Act, Section 31 and 37, which allows for cross-border data transfer and the access to data for research purposes.
Your time is up. My opponent, I'm glad you mentioned sensitization, which falls again in the realm of NIDS. We are easing the mind of the citizens of this nation by educating them, and that was the essence of a very successful pilot program where we told citizens what NIDS is, where we eradicate fear-mongering, where we reiterate that we are here to protect your data and your privacy and not expose it.
300.
And we would also, time not up. We would just like to add the data protection section that you are speaking of. If remember, every third party that has access to the data must be accredited by the authority. So they will check and ensure that the citizens' interests are in place and consent has to be given by the persons.
Again, my opponents, Data Protection Act Section 31 and 37, which allow for cross-border data transfer and the access to your data for research purposes. How can a law that has this make the Jamaican people feel comfortable knowing that persons are able to see in law, legally, their data?
My opponents, you're asking questions that have already been answered.
You have not.
We would have said to you that NERA is the oversight body in place. We would have also said to you that institutions that have access to the information has to be accredited by NERA. That is one tier. And also consent has to be given. That is 2 tier of protection, 2 tier of easing uncertainty. My opponents, please ask brand new questions. We have answered this for the second time.
How do you then?
Again, NIDS also has a layer of protection. So even if you're worried about the cross-border, if you have a cross-border concern, the infrastructure, the key that is in place, protects that and detects changes and ensures integrity.
Are you aware of what a cyber attack can do? With all of these protections in place, with all of the entities that have had attacks, how is it that you can guarantee that cyber attacks will not take place with all of this centralized information for Jamaican people?
My opponents, never once did we give you an 100% guarantee or full proof. We have admitted to the fact that breaches can take place. However, it is how you react to those breaches, it's the safeguards that are in place, it's the magnitude of breaches. You yourself have stated breaches all over, and of course, Jamaica is no different. We're susceptible to breaches, but why not put our best foot forward? Why not put forward our strongest firewalls, our strongest encryption, a centralized system with different layers of protection? We're not saying that breaches won't happen. We are saying that we, the government, is prepared for those breaches, to correct those breaches, and we also have penalties in place. That is in the law.
All right. Ooh. That was intense. Well, let's keep it going. AGD, ready? All right. You may begin. You may ask, rather, your first question of GIS.
My opponents, would you not agree that the Jam COVID breach was done in an emergency situation and it was an app as opposed to NIDS what took years of planning and listening and has a more robust security measures in place?
No, I would not. The breach did not occur as an emergency situation. The breach occurred because there was negligence on the inside of the app. The app was touted to have the latest data protection software and frameworks, yet it was breached because of negligence on the inside. That is something that NIDS is susceptible to as long as NERA will employ human beings, which it will.
My opponents, would you say that the perfect world that you speak about exists in Singapore and Kenya that currently has a mirror of NIDS that has been workable for the last 4 years?
Can we just point out that the fact that something is working well in a location for a specified time does not eliminate the possibility that the breach can take place here in Jamaica? So kudos to Kenya and Singapore and whoever else has not yet had a breach. But when entities like Facebook and NCB and entities that have the kind of money to put the safeguards in place still experience breaches, the possibility exists, and that is the major concern.
My opponent, you seem to be lacking a key word in the debate. We are talking about exaggeration. At no point in time did we say that the system in Kenya or Singapore was not being breached. We're saying it is how they reacted to that breach and the stronger implementation that would have taken place.
What's the question?
That should be a
What's the question? Or to address your statement, the presence of the possibility of a breach, the lack of operation for both NIDS, the operational framework for both NIDS and the Data Protection Act leaves us open to vulnerabilities, and therefore, until things are operational on the ground and running, our concerns about privacy and data protection cannot be exaggerated. We the people of Jamaica have to make it abundantly clear to the government that the concerns are real and they need to address it. Do not brush over it like India and then end up in a situation like India where our NIDS database gets hacked easily. And once the information is seen, you cannot unlearn it.
All right, so my opponents, you keep on mentioning India, but would you not say, you do not realize that India ignored the privacy of the people, and they in that society ignored the concerns of the people, but NIDS has not, and has, I'm saying, will you not agree that NIDS has listened to the people and have made the changes that India did not? So we are very different from India.
Are you aware that the Jamaican government did a similar thing in ignoring the concerns of civil society when Access Now came in and said there are some issues, the Parliament failed to resolve all of the concerns, and even after the Supreme Court struck down the act, what they came back with still fell short of the mark?
My opponents, I think you need to direct your focus to the current system that obtains the 2020 NERA Act. And just to move on, if there are legitimate privacy concerns regarding NIDS, why hasn't there been another legal challenge that, since the first one that you mentioned, a complaint to the Information Commissioner, or even a single protest?
Let us consider the fact that it is shrouded in secrecy. Many people do not even know. The information that we have been able to get, we have got by pulling teeth. And we have got by virtue of the fact that this is what we're doing. We're doing a debate. The information is not out there.
My opponent, you're contradicting yourself because you just spoke about a sensitization session rollout, which we agreed that took place. So that information is us educating the public.
May we have questions?
And the question
please?
is,
Thank you.
can this not easily be fixed by educating the people as that their concerns have been addressed, as we have been doing?
It is more than a public education that is needed at this point. Also, and a public education campaign is different from a sensitization session. Also, the 300 people that you said oversubscribed the pilot program for NIDS rollout. What percentage of the Jamaican population is that?
So,
All right, thank you. Thank you. Oh, I'm delighted that we get a break right now to digest that sumptuous feast of information. All right, so we take that 1 minute break to allow you
our viewers online, we apologize for that brief disruption that was caused by some technical issues that we were having, but we are back to wrap up the arguments that have been presented by both teams. Before we get into the reply speeches, Jermaine, back to you.
Thank you very much, Paula Shea. Great to be back so soon. All right, so we resume with and of course the teams are delighted they got far more than a minute. Yes, so let's get those engaging and substantial reply speeches, beginning with that from Team Opposition. At this time we invite the Opposition reply speaker. Here, from Team JIS.
Ladies and gentlemen, judges, my opponents, and my team, good morning. This moot tackles the fluid issue of how perspective shades and shapes perception. The recurring questions have been, who has privacy and data protection concerns? The answer, you do. I do. We all do. If you didn't, your laptop wouldn't have built-in firewall, you wouldn't shield your PIN from the cashier, nor would you pull your curtains at night. Now, if our concerns, and I say our because, for example, several letters to the editor have come from people from different sectors of society. So again, if our concerns are deemed exaggerated, who is deeming them so and why? You'll clearly have those who think caution, a second glance, or skepticism is doomsday thinking and a hindrance to progress. But the opposition wishes to remind everyone that we welcome NIDS. However, we don't do it blindly. Nearly 3 million of us are not behind the scenes of NIDS to see its technical prong being fully built out for privacy and data protection, and so cannot know nor be reassured of what it can and cannot do. We, the opposition, believe that an exaggeration can be confirmed or dispelled only by full understanding or knowledge of the truth. So, for a system such as NIDS, which is in its infancy and has such big implications for data use for the citizens of this country, and most importantly, a system where we do not fully understand how the privacy and data protection aspect will be operationalized as yet, on what grounds can concerns then be deemed exaggerated? In our research, the only verifiable groups that can speak with great confidence about NIDS are its creators and implementers, which shows that public trust has not yet been cemented because people cannot trust what they do not know. Where is the exaggeration in that? Is it an exaggeration or an exaggerated response when I, living in Mountain View, get on the ground when I hear a car backfire multiple times? No, especially not when you have had yellow tape tied to your very gate at the crack of dawn. So, if in a world where data is now considered synonymous with the human, big data as an industry is valued at $307 billion US, and privacy and data breaches abound internationally, would the concerns of a developing country about its new system that will collect their very valuable data be exaggerated? Our answer is no. Actually, I am curious to know what the litmus test for exaggeration is, Mr. Speaker. Is it the number of times a concern is raised, the words used to raise them, who raises them, the pitch used in raising them, the bold on the font when raising them? Were the gas riots an exaggeration of the people? How about slave revolts? Because it's clear the danger that presents itself regarding data breaches, especially since we've seen countless examples worldwide. And while NIDS can serve us for the better, and we accept that, the issue is once our data is out, no penalty can bring it back. That's something to be concerned about. In fact, it is because we have dug deep enough to understand the scope of what NIDS will collect, we counter the moot to say that privacy and data protection concerns for NIDS are in fact understated. In a world where data is dubbed the new oil, we cannot afford to not be concerned about the use of our data and the reach of governments into citizens' privacy. In a world where control over data could mean holding governments to ransom with the sale of its citizens' data on the dark web, we cannot afford to have our concerns smeared with the label of an exaggeration. And in a world where most Jamaicans will register for NIDS because it is the direction of the society and no one wants to be left behind, even at the expense of illusory consent, the protection of our people is of great concern. On April 11, 1912, there were 7 warning messages about icebergs on the Titanic's course. These messages were noted, but none were taken into account due to what has been found to be the pride and ignorance of both the telegraph operator and Captain E.J. Smith. Mr. Speaker, perhaps Mr. Smith thought the concerns were exaggerated. Perhaps he should have listened. The opposition rests firmly in our position that data protection concerns related to NIDS are not exaggerated. Thank you.
Thank you so very much for concluding the case on behalf of Team Opposition. At this time, I call upon the final speaker, Ms. Kudian King, from the proposition team to conclude her team's case and the debate overall. Hear, hear.
Ready? One person, one identity needs a FIWI. All protocols observe. It is prudent of me to identify the major clashes that would have took place in this debate today. We have Team Opposition saying that we don't know if it will work because it has not been implemented as yet. However, to that Team Proposition has said that the boards for NID has been appointed. There's a current merger with RGD. There are authorities in place, and we are not rushing hasty implementation. We are seeking to put our best foot forward. Team Opposition also said to you that there is an illusion of consent and that NIDS violate the data principles like data minimization, to which we've responded to say that we told you that you would need consent, that you would have to give consent to access your information, We told you that it is also not a mandatory system and you will not be denied any food services in Jamaica for not consenting to NIDS. The second speaker came and she spoke about the operational framework and list the many breaches that took place. To that we have said that legislations are currently in place. To that we have said that NIDS has been building for over 7 years. To that we have said that NIDS has been funded $68 million. So what is the difference, you may ask? We have more protection, better infrastructure, better firewalls, and we have $68 million more to create better security. Now, moving on, you were just told that the only persons that are able to speak on NIDS confidently is the creator or the implementer. We are neither. But we were able to find this information, which shows that the information is available. Team Proposition would have laid blocks in this debate, salient points that were feebly, if any at all, attacked by Team Opposition. We have admitted to the shortcomings of NIDS 2017, but we have said that NIDS 2020 remodel have corrected those, have taken your privacy and data concerns in consideration, and that the current concern that exists are exaggerated. My opponent, come with me on a tour as I restate the winning arguments. 1, we told you that all Jamaicans were previously required to provide excessive information under a more unsecure database. We told you that NIDS was redesigned and now champions security and protection of citizens' data. We told you that NIDS reduced crime in the form of identity theft, as there is now a centralized national database which provides a safe, dependable identification, verification, authentication system, once more safeguarding your rights. 3, are you with me on the tour, team opposition? We told you that NIDS 2020 collects the minimum information needed and is more inclusive for those under 18. NIDS will gather and store your data securely, independently, and it will be encrypted. We told you that the data collected must be adequate, relevant, and limited to what is intended for. We've put that in law. We've said that NERA will restrict access to only accredited third party and only respond as is necessary and required consent to access the information. We've also stated that penalties have been increased under the law. In the event that there are any privacy or data protection violation, my opponents, there are layers of protection, protecting you, protecting me, protecting all of we. We also reinforce that NERA, along with other regulatory enforcement provision, exist, like the Data Protection Act for collecting, storing, and processing data, the Information Commissioner that oversees the Data Protection Act, the National Data Inspectorate which oversees NERA and our NIDS. Mr. Adjudicator, this is what we call proper checks and balances. We on team proposition also showed you the establishment of the National Public Key Infrastructure that offers maximum security through firewalls, swift detection in data changes, and manages encryptions. Team proposition dispelled further concern with the present design of NIDS, showing that NIDS will protect the privacy of individuals, it will protect their personal data, and that it is not mandatory. Team proposition would undoubtedly have this debate won when we spoke about NIDS redesigning for the people, and that we will not allow the fear-mongering of opposition to sway us from progressing as a nation. So say it with me. Onward we go. One person, one identity, NIDS a few. Thank you.
Thank you very much for concluding the debate. And with that, we are definitely at the end. So at this time, we as judges, we have a lot to go and discuss, digest, ruminate over, in order to arrive at the decision as to who prevails and who will ultimately advance to the semifinals of this year's competition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jermaine. So to NIDS or not to NIDS, several biting arguments put forward by both sides, once again in debating the moot. Be it resolved that privacy and data protection concerns relating to NIDS are exaggerated. Thank you, teams, and the judges will now depart to deliberate, and as always, we will use that time to refresh ourselves. The next person you will hear from will be the chief adjudicator, who will sum up the match and announce the winner. For those of you online, stay tuned. We will be right back.
the debate that just went on had to do with data protection, privacy, needs, and whether or not concerns within the public at large surrounding the integrity and the capacity of needs to safeguard their privacy and their data, whether those concerns are exaggerated. That is a most topical issue. And so we were treated to a fantastic debate, an engaging contest. I think the teams deserve a round of applause. So the teams in this match, on side proposition, we had the AGD, that's the Administrative General's Department, and on team opposition, Jamaica Information Service. So we got from team AGD a range of robust mechanisms that exist within NIDS to safeguard one's data, to ensure that privacy is maintained, multi-layered, multi-infrastructure, multiple mechanisms to ensure that data breaches are far and few in between, if at all possible. JIS tells us that this needs concept comes within a societal environment where people are just skeptical of government. People look at the evidence that exists wherein governments would have lost data through things like COVID, that private entities like NCB would have lost data, that countries far afield, India, we heard about Facebook, having had data breaches. And it is within this context that they say people are justified in being concerned. They say to us that furthermore, whatever robust mechanisms that exist within NIDS may not be as robust as team proposition would have us believe. They say that there is some aspect of the robustness that is yet to be achieved. For example, they say legislatively, there is an important bit of legislative infrastructure that is yet to come into being, that is projected to come on stream in September 2024. They say the absence of that makes NIDS at this point in time very vulnerable. They tell us furthermore that there are examples. I think both teams agree that there are examples in the global arena that one could look at to see how it would work. They contend that these aren't mirror images, they are not perfect examples, but yes, we can learn something from them. One of the concerns we have from Team JIS, and I want to point to it here, is the fact that oftentimes the examples we felt were persuasive to a point, in as much as we didn't think that they were always articulated as being directly relevant to the needs context. They tried to make it relevant by saying, well, we're talking about Facebook, for example. Facebook, a global enterprise, a global juggernaut, and if they can have data breaches, well, what do you expect will happen with little poor Jamaica? We wanted to hear a little bit more comparison to say, to inform us that yes, there are robust mechanisms that existed at Facebook, in NCB, in COVID, for example, in India, and yet these mechanisms failed. And these mechanisms are comparative to the mechanisms that NIDS has established. The NERA, the National Key Protocol Infrastructure, I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that, yes? The multi-layered mechanisms, yes? We wanted to see some comparisons to say it exists here, maybe called something else, performing the similar role, yet it was breached. We don't think that Jamaica provides any way of escape from data breaches and privacy breaches. We unfortunately didn't get that. So the comparison was a bit lacking. We also felt that this debate required from the outset, and this is a particular concern that we're foisting on team proposition, some kind of an evaluation of the degree of concern that exists within the society, and juxtapose that or weigh that or place that against the robustness, that exist with NIDS and help us to see that on one hand you have this massive skepticism, huge concern, but then with NIDS we have unprecedented robustness and safety mechanisms that make it unjustifiable, and therefore the motion operates in their favor. We think as well team opposition does quite a good job of proving to us that there are legitimate reasons to be concerned. But the problem we have as judges is appreciating, yes, that there are legitimate reasons for concerns. We buy Team JIS's case, but we don't know that the legitimacy is the same thing as saying that it exists to a sufficient or great enough extent to make it justifiable, or not to make it exaggerated. So legitimacy is not comparative to exaggeration, right, or the exaggerated nature of it. We think that that speaks to a quantification of the concern, not so much the extent to which it is reasonable for there to be concern. We think that that nuance needed to have been engaged with a little bit more by both teams in the debate, and specifically a bit more from Team Jamaica Information Service. So, ladies and gentlemen, in what was a most fascinating exchange of ideas, a learning experience for us on the adjudication panel. 2 teams contested, and the scores are as follows. 281, that's the winning score, to 272. So a 9-point difference. Ladies and gentlemen, the winner of this match in the quarterfinals round of the public sector debate competition for 2024, the team that advances to the semi-final round of this competition is Team AGD. Congratulations, Team AGD. And let me get a strong round of applause for Team Jamaica Information Service. I just want to say that in terms of giving a bit of constructive advice, this motion lent itself to Team JIS, for example, defending the high levels of skepticism, not as a reflection of the objective concerns that exist with NIDS, but that there are possibly other utilities to be had from the high levels of skepticism. So, for example, when Team JIS tells us that government has earned the level of distrust that exists, we could have had, well, irrespective of NIDS, this possibly pushes the government towards ensuring that there's greater robustness, there's greater communication to the citizen to earn the citizen's trust. That's a value or a benefit that is independent of NIDS. So those kinds of analysis we felt were also very much lacking in this debate. Now, who was the best debater? The best debater comes to us from Team AGD. That debater is Miss Cudian King. I believe Paula Shea is here to present a token, a gift to our best debater, yes? Okay. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for tuning in. Hoping you enjoyed this contest and looking forward to having you on board, viewing and sharing and joining the conversation for the subsequent matches. Thank you.